On to some virtual art prompts. So I'm going to introduce 3 activities for you guys to try at home. So dun dun dun, I'm gonna move my cue cards. Okay, so I was going to have a table at the book launch for creating a self-care plan, but I'm actually dedicating next week's video all to self-care. So you can tune in next week for that. Making a self-care plan. Who has lots of Bristol board? I do. Actually, I'm just using all the pages I did for my speech bubbles for Mona. I have like 200 of these pages, so I've just been using them so now they're for my filming. So instead of that, I'm going to focus on 3 other activities. So the first one is inspired by a scene in the book and a metaphor I use a lot of times for when I am feeling depressed, that I'm down the well. Be like, I'm down the well right now. And that chapter that we just read shows Mona building her own well, as so to speak, because I feel like that it's sort of, sometimes I feel like I fall into it, but other times I feel like I build it around myself. So here's like I pulled out the original drawings just to like hold up, so that's easier to see. Isn't that? Yeah. Thank you, Juliet. So we have Mona down the well, and her therapist, Dr. Vega, is at the top of the well, and they're talking about what do you do to help you get out of the well? Because I feel like it's a metaphor that can resonate for everybody, and it's sort of, I feel like when you use metaphor, it can allow your subconscious to give you some information that you might not normally have access to, because you're sort of speaking in symbolism and archetypes. It's very Carl Jung. So in this panel, she is, her therapist is like, well, what things help you emotionally, physically, mentally? So here we have like some ropes with on them written words like hiking, fresh air, full 8 hours of sleep, real food, vitamins, the physical stuff that's helping her. Then here are these bricks that are jutting out from the wall are labeled things like meditation, I think, no screens after 9:30. Listening, silence, reading, limit violent content, because I know, like, that's part of my self-care plan. Actually, this is all part of my self-care plan. Then things that also help, like, written on balloons here, long hot baths, making music mixes, nature, comedy, hugs, doodling. And then this other example has ladders with the names of people written on each rung of people that help pull you out of the well. So for her, it's like Haley, her parents, her therapist, her orchestra standmate, her friend who moved away. So things like balloons, ropes, ladders, these are all just different metaphors to represent to you like what helps you get out of the well. So for an art prompt, let's see, I'm just gonna put the letter. So art prompt wise, at the book launch event, I was going to have this be a collage activity because I love drawing a lot, but like right now I have trouble focusing. And so actually I don't feel like drawing like as much. So all these activities are a little bit more adapted for if you're a little scatterbrained, like right now. So for this activity, I have a bunch of different samples. So for the first version I did, I just got 2 different colors of construction paper. I have a light and a dark. And I did a few different versions of this metaphor. So here's like an example of the ladder. So I used my dark construction paper to represent like the dark well, and then the light colored construction paper to create on top of that, how am I getting out of this well? So for this activity, I first took a light color pencil, which, I have it. So I have a light color pencil that matches actually my light color. And so I drew in like the bricks here, and then I cut out a ladder and put it on. So then so what I need to do is actually write in on here the names of the people in my support system, which I was gonna do, and I totally forgot to do it before we started this video. Another version of that is I cut out a bunch of hands. I feel like sometimes hands can go creepy, so so I was a little like, I'm gonna try hands. So for this one, I drew my bricks a little bit differently. I drew them more like floaty bricks, more like cartoonist style where you don't draw each one. So I drew that on my background, then cut out all these different arms. And again, I would write on these arms to label them as maybe they're people who are helping me, or maybe they are actions that help me, maybe they're places that help me. This is sort of like a visual version of a self-care plan, actually. And I played around with the balloon because I love balloons as a metaphor. So for this one, I drew in, instead of drawing bricks like I'm in a well, I drew it more stars like I'm in darkness. And then the balloons, I would label each one of these representing something that helps uplift you, something that helps pull you up. Because I feel like that lightness and like transcendence, these are also metaphors that I use for my mood. But then I got to thinking, why am I just using solid paper? Like if we're doing a collage, you can cut up materials that represent what makes you feel uplifted and happy. So I have a stockpile of old calendars. So I picked a really pretty like meadowscape of all these different wildflowers, and I cut the arms out of these. So that represents more of like, okay, this is something that's like reaching out to me and like giving me a hand when I need it. And then there's like my little hand, like, oh, I can't reach you. Like, oh, here, we're here to help you. So you could do this activity as a drawing activity, which you're welcome to. I was just playing with collage because when I feel kind of, just cutting things out feels really satisfying. And so for you, it might be something I didn't model here for how you climb out of the well. Maybe it's a pogo stick. Maybe it's you have winged shoes. Maybe you have, I don't know, maybe your head is a balloon. Maybe the bricks sticking out of the wall are books, and it's books that are helping you climb out. So this is basically, you're learning how I do like my art therapy activities on myself, is I come up with just some good imagery to help me give form to something that's abstract. And then in getting to know what form fits best, that's always what really teaches me something about my emotions. Because maybe to you, though it helps you get out of the well, maybe, I don't know, it's like a magical helper like eagles or butterflies. And I feel like that whatever hope takes form for you is really helpful, and you can use that in your everyday life. Yeah, so the things that help you get out of the well is who helps you, what helps you, where helps you, what actions help you. So I would start off with just making a list, and then cutting out a bunch of the same thing, whether it's balloons or hands or butterflies or whatnot, and playing with them on the page. So that is first art activity. Oh good, I'm doing well on time. Yeah. Dun, dun, dun. So first activity, collage. And I must say, at the book launch party, I was going to have people make life-size versions of their hands, and written on the arm was going to be what helps pull them out of the well. And I was going to collect them and make them into an installation. And I still might do it. Because I've been talking with one of my art nerds, Jennifer Hoy Tidwell, about doing a living installation, so I still want to do it. So, yeah, so I still might be putting out a feeler for that. But for now, it's just something I'm encouraging you to do at home. So, art activity number two. This one gets more into, let's see, get stuff everywhere. This one actually is a little inspired by Mona, but also my last book, Sketchbook Dares. This is my copy of Sketchbook Dares, so it's like full of a lot of stuff. Things. If you're not familiar with this book, it's an interactive sketchbook with my favorite drawing prompts and activities. So some of them are about hands, some of them are about heart, some of them are about brain, and some are about the spirit. But to me, it's like a holistic approach to creativity, because I don't know about you guys, but I don't do the same thing all the time. I like to explore. So one of the dares in here is called the Darker Dare, and it's actually sort of a matter-inspired activity. So here, I'll just like hold up my little directions in the book, but I'm going to go over in a little more detail for you, because this is inspired by what I've done in my personal art. So I like to play with silhouette. I feel like collage is a good way to express yourself if you don't feel like being super technical, but also using a silhouette makes it's like a shortcut. But I feel like shortcuts aren't necessarily bad. Oh yeah! So these are some examples of art that I've made in the past that uses silhouettes. So here, I'll get one of these. Dun-da-da. So yeah, so I like to use the silhouette of a person and then sort of insert in there a metaphor. Partly is because it's a good way to get ideas out quickly. There's that one. But another reason I like using silhouettes is because I feel like that then other people can put themselves into it. Like, if I see an image with a silhouette, then I can imagine like I'm this person who is the silhouette, and I feel like it's really like accessible and inclusive. Because I don't want to just make art that's all about me. I want art that someone else can be like, oh, I felt like what it's like to have a black hole in my heart. Yeah, this is definitely a pre-Mona drawing. And so I feel like silhouettes are underrated. Thank you, Julia. I know, we're like rolling around. And so for this drawing activity, I start off with basically starting with journaling. Because this activity is all about giving form to your matter, which takes a lot of different shapes for Mona in the book. Sometimes it's water, sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's, I'm not thinking of another good example. It's other things. Sometimes it's outer space. And so for me, whenever I feel like something's not right, I feel stressed, I feel anxious, I feel something, I don't know what's going on, I don't like it, I normally start with getting my spiral notebook and just doing some journaling, like, okay, what's going on? Let's just dump it all out and like word vomit and try to just label what's going on. So first step, labeling. Like, what is this feeling? Is it like, is it anxiety or is it stress? Is it jealousy? So I find that it's hard enough just to label what's going on. And normally once I identify that and, you know, do a little journaling and reflect on it, then I've tried to give it form, like, because as a visual artist, you're sort of acting everything out just in your head. So for me as a graphic novelist, body language is a huge deal. Like how the characters are holding their bodies is expressing a lot. So for you, if you nail down like, okay, the emotion I have is I'm depressed. You know, when I'm depressed, like, you think about like, okay, what body language is this? Like, am I like hunched over? Am I curled up in a ball? Am I like in bed? Like, what's your body language to express what this emotion is? And you just sort of, and it might feel kind of silly because I think it's like I don't know, especially if you're an introvert, you're like, oh, like acting it out. But sometimes, like, for this sort of exercise, you could even take a photo of yourself, like set up your phone or a camera or ask a friend and like basically try to like really amplify it as much as possible and figure out what your body language is and use that as the basis of your drawing. So for this example, like, of course it's kind of hard to see, but the body, you know, I guess it's a little easier to see there. So the body language here is more sort of like falling back, like like she's losing her grounding. Because also the body language, it really, I don't know, to me it really tells a story. So that's one part, is your silhouette. But the second part is, how does the matter fit into it? So in this example here, the matter is sort of like a cloud around her chest. So to you, whatever form your matter is taking, I would ask you to think to yourself, is this something that is inside my body or is it outside my body? And I feel like these little questions actually make a big difference. Because if it's something like in your body, where is it in your body? How is it making you feel? Or is it outside of you and it sort of is affecting you more like from the outside? Because sometimes also when I get these drawing ideas, like in here, sometimes it's like really close up versus other times we're like really far away. So that's another question I'll ask is, you know, when I'm imagining this idea, am I thinking like this is my point of view, which is normally close up? Or am I more from like far away, seeing myself like from a distance? And I don't know, maybe this is just how my brain operates, but these are the sort of questions that help me unlock, I don't know, what's really going on in there. And I also think it's helpful to distort the body. So you can do a silhouette of yourself, you know, acting out how you're feeling, figure out where your matter is in all of this, how it's affecting you, where it's affecting you. But you might also want to distort your silhouette. So maybe your limbs are elongated, or maybe they're tangled up. Maybe you're upside down, you know, because if you're doing a silhouette also, you can really like push it. So, well, it's not the best example. These are like, oh wait, I know a good example. Was one I just read in the chapter here, where Mona feels like drawn and quartered and pulled in different directions. So I've elongated her limbs here to make it look like she's like stretched out forever, like she's really being pulled in different directions. So I feel like take creative license with how you draw your silhouette. It doesn't have to be how you actually look. It can be a lot more abstract and stylized. And I actually have a fun example of how my mom's cousin Wendy Addison did this activity. This was her reaction of drawing her matter. And isn't this haunting? I feel like I know this face. Like, have you seen this? Mm-hmm. Like, so if you don't feel like doing a silhouette like I have in the prompt, you can just draw straight up what your matter looks like, especially if like you, I don't know, I feel like a lot of us have a version of the matter. That's how I personify my sort of negative thoughts. But I've also taken different approaches. So some variations, just because I like lessons that aren't one size fits all. Because I'll talk about my matter as the matter, but I also, recently I've been playing with Mr. Unworthy. So this is like a really cute version of my matter who looks like a Muppet, because this is like the part of the matter who just is like follows me around all the time and just goes unworthy, 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 unworthy. And that's all he knows. He's like Groot or Hodor. It's the only word he knows. So I thought, you know what? He's not going away. I'm going to be friends with him because this is art therapy. So this is like another version of my matter who's super cute. So your matter might not be this imposing dark creature. I've also drawn my matter as a character called my inner critic, because I talk about the inner critic a lot. They're the ones who are like, what's that supposed to be? What do you think you're doing? You should get a real job. And so this is a sample page for Sketchbook Dares where I drew my inner critic as these little sort of Pac-Man ghosts. Because in my head, that's what my inner critic looks like. Instead of one character, he's like a whole bunch of little characters. And they're like the peanut gallery. Like, oh, what do you think you're doing? Also known as the fraud police. The fraud police is another sort of version of the matter.
Who do you think you are? What are you doing here? You're not qualified. Why do you think you should talk to these people about this stuff? You don't know anything.
Yep. There's so many more better artists than you with more likes. You know. You should just give up. And this is my little genius shining a light on my inner critic. But yeah, they're just like here with this. They represent a lot of things.
Like the grumpy old guys in the Muppets gallery that sit up, constantly critique and judge everything that's happening. Lots of judgment.
Yeah, and I think right now it's easy for the judgment to sort of take over the conversation in our head. So then now there's a lot more doubt, there's a lot more comparison. So I think these things are amplified even more now. But if you draw about them, if you give them visual form, then you can like talk to them and it's like, oh, I know who you are. Like, oh, it's you again. It's like, you suck. It's like, oh, I know, I've heard you say that before. Like, what else you got, you know? And it sort of takes some of the power away from them, which I don't know, I feel like I knew, but until I did it, I didn't really, like actually drawing about the matter in here, now I really can recognize the matter's voice when it's like whispering to me. And I'm like, I know who you are. And like, I don't have to listen to you. because there's other voices I can tap into. And I actually have a PDF of this activity, the Darker Dare from Sketchbook Dares. There's a PDF of this that I've put on Google Drive. So I think Larkin will put a link in there. Oh, because Larkin is on it. High five, Larkin. It's an honor angel. Okay, so that is drawing prompt number 2 for you guys to try at home. And now I'm down to last art activity. Ta-da! All the stuff everywhere. Okay, so last activity, I was hoping to have real sunflowers because Mona's favorite flower is a sunflower because it sort of looks, because there was a scene in here, I didn't mark it. Well, there's a scene in here where I drew the pain that Mona was feeling and it looked like a sunflower because it was like black on the inside with sort of radiating on the outside, and I realized like, oh shoot, that looks like a sunflower because there's a celestial sub-theme in the book. And I really like, I don't know, I love sunflowers. I wanted to have like real sunflowers to share, but the line at Trader Joe's was pretty bonkers. So I was like, this is what I had in my collage drawer. So these aren't actually sunflowers, but they look like these are sunflowers. But no, here's a happy one. So in honor of Mona's favorite flower, this last prompt is a mashup, because I feel like mashups are also good when you feel kind of scatterbrained and you can't really focus on one thing. It's good because then you can just create something that, I don't know, it doesn't exist and no one can tell you that it can't be that. So if you're unfamiliar with a mashup, that's where you take different things, where you switch up how something is supposed to look, and you play with it. The drawing dare that this also taps into is called the stylized dare. It's where basically exploring different ways to draw the same thing. Because I feel like everyone knows how to draw like a flower. Flowers are pretty like standard, like even in like elementary school we could all draw the flowers with the cool petals. That's one of those things where like, oh yeah, I can draw some flowers. But I think creatively it's fun to just play around with one motif in a bunch of different ways just to play, because I don't know, especially right now. So for sunflower mashups, I have, well, I was going to draw more examples. I just have a couple examples. I have one of switching out the petals and one of switching out the disc or the center. I'm not sure what to call. Disc sounds scientific. I'm trying to look it up. So here I was playing around with like, okay, what if I turn the petals into feathers? And here I was like, what if I change the middle into like a giant eyeball? Because who doesn't love giant eyeballs? I know I love eyeballs. And so my prompts for this one are, okay, for the outside, what to change the outside to. So you could do it to feathers like I did in my little example, or it could be flames, it could be solar flares, it could be hair. The petals could be coming off or coming in or moving or creating their own composition. You could have, they could be butterfly wings, they could be hands or limbs or fabric or ribbon, like changing the medium, or playing with scale, shape, or texture. So I just invite you to take the basic formula of a sunflower and just experiment and have fun, because also flowers are fun. And I feel like if you sort of do a mashup between like flowers and celestial stuff, that's super cool. I didn't pull out the paints and everything to like really get into this, so I just did a marker one real quick. But like I think the inside would be really cool if you did it as like a moon or an actual sun or a black hole, an eclipse, or just a sea of starry skies or a spinning galaxy, or maybe it's a blue sky and clouds in the middle. Because basically I think of the inside of the flower as just a frame. Like you could put anything in there. Maybe you make it into a spiral design. Maybe there's a face. Maybe there's an animal face. Maybe there's a clock face. Maybe it's a giant eyeball. Or maybe it's like a jewel. I don't know. It's just, I feel like the formula of the flower with a central design and things radiating out from it, I just think it's fun to play with. Because also I think the springtime is influencing me because of all the flowers everywhere. They're sort of like, look at me, draw me, I'm beautiful. And I'll listen to them because they are beautiful and I do want to draw them. So that is third drawing activity, is to do your interpretation of a weirdo sunflower. And if it's not a sunflower, it could be a different flower. Because also I like the idea of the flower combined with like celestial imagery, because it's very macro, micro in nature. Because when I feel down, nature is always reaffirming to me. Like, it's one of those things that helps me heal and feel grounded. Like, sure, I can go out and look at the cosmos. I'm like, I am tiny and insignificant. But then I look at the little flowers. I'm like, oh, I'm just right here right now. And so I think you need a little bit of both. You need the big point of view, and you need the little small scope too. Because if you spend too much time on one end or the other, you can get a little lost in there. So it's just a balance. And so, okay, so I've run through 3 art activities, and I Artner dare you all to try them at home. And if you feel like sharing them, please post them or email them to me, and I'd love to see them. Because also I'm curious, like, yeah, like what things help you guys get out of the well, how you would interpret the different flower mashups, and what your matter looks like. So yeah, if you feel like sharing it, I would love to see.